Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the All You Can Board podcast. I'm Braden.
I'm Dylan.
And I'm Carlo.
On today's episode, our main course will be board game Foreplay. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, we're going to be talking about how much or what content do you consume before you buy a board game. Are you reading the rules? Do you watch trailers, playthroughs, all that and more? But first, let's serve up a little appetizer. Dylan, what do you have this week?
Okay, so I have recently played Fea's Swamp. This was on my list for a while. I picked it up. I played a 3-player game with 2 of my friends. Hoping to play with both of you in the future because I'm really curious what you guys think. But I'm only going to talk briefly about kind of like that session and just the game in general. It's going to be more so around the specific topic of point differences between sessions of the same game. So like what I mean is you could play one game and say the top score was 50 and you play that same game another time and the top score is like 200 and just that kind of aspect specifically because we played this game of Fea's Swamp. And so for those who didn't know, it uses it's designed by the same folks who did Terra Mystica, Age of Innovation, that whole package of games. And it uses the same, I think they said it's sort of like some people have described it as like a sister game, and it uses the same kind of like hexagon grid system. But I have to admit that like after playing it, I almost expected it to feel more like Terra Mystica than it did. It aspects of it do for sure, but it also very much still feels like its own game. Like this is like a worker placement pick up and deliver style game, which Terra Mystica is definitely not either of those things. So it is very different, but there are endgame objectives in this, and there's a whole bunch of different ones that you can get. And for those who have played games with me, and you guys will know, especially when I'm doing my very first play of a game, I like to just kind of like if I win, great, but I'm usually just sort of trying things. It's like the pushing buttons and seeing how it works, and then you get a better sense of the game, especially ones that have like complexity to them, heaviness to them, which this one does. And so I wasn't necessarily going for like the optimal play, but I was still picking a direction and just trying my best to stick to it. But there was these 2 endgame objectives that I considered, but I didn't consider them nearly as much as our good friend Dave did in this game. And one of those endgame objectives is something I haven't seen in board games before, or like in games I've played, where the endgame objective actually is like it's squares the score. So like just to summarize it quickly, it's like if you have 10 of your I can't remember the name of them in the game. It's like not your huts, but whatever. It's your tiles. If you have 10 of them, and that is your largest group of them, you get 10 times 10. It's the squaring 10, square root of 10, whatever. I'm not good at math, so don't blame me here. But so you get 100 points for that single scoring objective. And because we let Dave get complete control of this objective, he ended up with like 15 or 16 in his largest group. And it's squared, and he got like 254 points or something like that from one endgame scoring objective. So his one endgame scoring objective was a higher score than my entire score. I think I scored like 209 over everything I scored for. And from what I had read, I did a little bit of reading on this game before I picked it up. And some of the stuff I had read said that the scores can vary kind of wildly, where you can, in one game you play, depending on which end game scoring objectives come up, the highest score in that game might be like 100 or 75 or something like that. And then there's the one that we play where the highest score is like 430 or something like that. So I don't know that I've played another game with that. And to be fair, I've only played this one, so I haven't experienced this swing in points. But from going off of what I've read and assuming it's true, it was more wanting to pose the question to you two, and then also get our listeners thinking it as well, or maybe they can comment after and let us know. I'm just curious, are there other games that have like such wildly different scores between games where you can play once and the high score is under 100, you play it again, the high score is 400? You know, like the only one I can think of was like the So Clever series, but that one, roll and writes, I feel like are more susceptible to that because like, or even just comboing in general. But like I was struggling to find other ones even on the spot after we played. We were kind of talking about it. So yeah, I wanted to pose it to you guys. Is there any other games you can think of that have such a wildly different like score between sessions?
I would think that for a game to qualify for this, it would have to have some sort of variable setup where, it obviously makes scoring different objectives either easier or harder depending on where things are. One potential game, but I don't think it varies wildly necessarily because there aren't very high scores in this game. It's actually one that we played pretty recently, is Bus, because depending on like what buildings are out there, how you are vrooming, what actions people are taking with the time stop option, you could only be scoring 5 points being the winning score, maybe, depending. Maybe it's your first play. Maybe we're just terrible at Bus. I don't know. But, typically you're probably going to be around that 10-point mark is kind of the winner's mark. But, you could be all the way up to 15, and that's like a massive score in Bus, too. So, it really depends on how well you're doing that.
Yeah, and I guess I should have done this as like sort of like a companion question to what I asked is, do you like that? Like, do you prefer to play a game and say, okay, like I know based on previous plays, or even as I'm teaching it to someone else, to be able to say, like you can consider if you hit around 70, that's a good score. If you hit 100, that's a really good score. Or is that something that's important to you or that you prefer? Or do you like kind of going in and not knowing based on what the variable setup is, what a winning score is going to be, and not having that element to sort of give you a benchmark for how your game is going? Like, Carlo, do you have a preference, or you don't really care one way or the other?
I definitely prefer not knowing what a good score is, or not having like a specific score that is considered good, like consistently for a specific game, because then I think I don't like having where you can kind of like reach a target and then let's say we're 70-80% of the way into the game, I'm like, well, I already cracked 40 points and I know that the winner like almost never ends with 30, so like I'm probably good. I don't want to feel like comfortable before the game is over, so I would say it comes down to that mostly. But I just want to throw a couple other games out there real quick, like along with Bus was a great example, but like High Society, depending how early or late in the game that fourth green card comes out to end the game. Also something like The Estates, where the winning score could be 30 or it could be like -12. You can actually win with a negative score, which is pretty ridiculous. So even a game like Forest Shuffle, where you have the third winter card comes out, so you could end the game with like 50 cards left in the deck, or it could be the last card in the deck. Even
Forest Shuffle's a great one, and I didn't think of that for some reason, even though I've played it so much. That's a great
because I've seen people ask online, like, what's a good score in Forest Shuffle? And it's like, well, depends on a lot of things. Like, when did that third winter card come out? How many players were you playing with, too? Because the more players in a lot of these games, the lower your score is going to be, because usually the fewer turns you get if the game is determined by a set number of like cards that have to be drawn or tiles. Like even in Carcassonne, I've had games where I win with 60 points, and I've had games where I lose with well over 100. Doesn't mean because I scored 100 points I did better than the game where I got 60. It's just you're playing a different style of game. But when you're talking about like the specific high numbers in Fea's Swamp, like with one of the scores being over 400 or whatever, like you said, the only ones that come to mind, I'm going to name two that I'm not as experienced with, one being Tapestry, another being Civolution. Both of those I've only played like a couple times, and I know those scores can be in the hundreds at least. I don't know how wildly they can vary, but then I'm going to throw Findorf in there, because one of the games we played of Findorf, I think the winning score was like 900 something, and then another time we played, the winning score was like 500 something, and maybe like I think second or third place might have been around like 300. Again, it's player count dependent. I think the game with 900 was 2 players, whereas the lower scores were with a 3 or 4 player game, but still.
Yeah, those are all great call-outs. And I'm also, before I kick it over to the next appetizer, I'm going to ask anyone listening, if you have played multiple games of Fea's Swamp, I'd love to know, either if you're watching or listening on YouTube, comments there, or on any podcast platform, if you want to leave a comment, and just let me know what your varying scores are in Fea's Swamp, because I don't know when the next time I'll play it again is. Hopefully soon, but I find that like the chances that I'm going to play a specific game multiple times, like in a year, isn't even assured sometimes. So I don't know how soon I'll have something to compare with. So I'm just very curious. So if you're listening and you've played a bunch of times, let us know your scores, because I would love to know.
Yeah. Braden, what about you, by the way? Did you like having the target score or not knowing as well?
Not knowing, because I think it just adds that extra level of complexity. Like, you are solving for that particular game, and like you said, Carlo, it kind of takes a little bit of the tension out of the game. Maybe if you feel like you're hitting a certain benchmark when it comes to the game itself, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm at this score, I'm doing pretty well at this stage, blah 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 blah. So if it's going to vary wildly, it's usually because the game is providing you the resources to have to solve for what is going to be a good score in this particular play.
And I still think there's certain instances where it might be helpful to have some idea of what a score could look like in a game. Like, even when we played something like Big Shot and someone was like, I don't know, like, do I take loans? Like, what's even just knowing that a winning score could be negative or like 2 helps to guide someone to be like, okay, this isn't like a super bad idea necessarily to take a loan right off the bat.
Carlo, give us your appetizer for this evening or morning, depending when you're listening.
All right, so this is just going to be a follow-up to our last episode, Board Game Blind Spots. And because we were running a bit long near the end of the episode, we had a lot of games to cover, the way we were kind of putting together this list. I didn't want to push back too much on any of the games, but there's one that's really been, I'm sure Dylan and I both, if looking back on the list, we'd both want to maybe shove a couple extra games on there if we could. But the one I'm really going to just make a push for here that I think was I can't really let it slide that we didn't put it on the list is Acquire. And I kind of at the time said, like, it's super influential, and I said I'm not really going to get into it here on the episode. But the more I've been thinking about it, so not only is it considered by many to be like the first actual Euro game, because before that a lot of the board games were, more of what is considered, like, I don't really like to use the term Ameritrash, but a lot of the games that focus on like conflict, confrontation, a lot of randomness, player elimination, games like Risk, that kind of thing. Even Monopoly, not confrontation in the same way necessarily, but like games that have that kind of like take that and whatever. And so Acquire was like probably the first game about like making, or like first big strategy game to focus on like making money, that kind of replaced, I would say, Monopoly in a way. It's the first big stock market manipulation game that dealt with like mergers and economic speculation and stuff like that hadn't really showed up in other games. There was no dice. I mentioned no player elimination, no attacking other players, that kind of thing. And a couple other pitches I'm going to make for it is like, one is that there's actually a study I found that was done in 2014. This study was done in Korea. And here, I'm just going to pull it up right now. The name of the study was Learning Effect of Acquire Board Game in Engineering Economics Class. And I'm just going to read something from the conclusion here to you guys. So this paper shows the learning effects of Acquire board game using statistical analysis. The implications of this paper are summarized as follows. Acquire board game is a very effective tool to educate 4 basic rules of economics that a founder of a startup company who lacks in funds is advantageous to sell a business to a large company to raise funds for new business. A large company is you know what? Never mind. I'm not gonna get into the nitty gritty of it, but basically, it's supporting the fact that playing Acquire can actually help you learn some of the basic principles of economics, while also saying that it's like a good tool to just like, engage students in fun while learning. But
I will say that, and this is like, I'm not saying you didn't sell me on it with anything you said. That was definitely part of it, but just pulling up some of the photos on Board Game Geek of the board with all, like, again, I don't know the rules of this game, but just like all the different number slots and your fact that you're putting these tiles onto the specific slots, and it looks like you can put buildings on them as well. That alone, like just the intricateness or the fiddliness of it looks super interesting and intriguing to me. So I feel like that, along with you pushing for it, like, I'm not going to say no. Like, I'm intrigued, and honestly, I want to play more Sid Saxon games in general. It's why I picked up Sleuth in the first place. I think he's just a designer in general that I feel like is a blind spot, maybe for all of us, but definitely for me. So, yeah, you know what? You had me at first Euro game. We can say we can make this a blind spot.
Awesome. I was also going to say that it's still being played at the World Series of Board Gaming, even though it was released in 1963, which is pretty wild.
When are we all going to compete in the World Series of Board Gaming? When are they going to invite us down to be competitors?
I guess when you decide you want to go to make the trip down to Vegas.
Never.
I think we have a standing invite. I think we have a standing invite if we ever wanted to go.
We can pick. We can take in a Golden Knights game. Your favorite team, Carlo.
Get out of here. I won't even comment on that. So yeah, acquire. All right, it's going on the blind spot list.
Yeah, I'm for this for sure. I think it's interesting that you could use that board game to then teach a little bit more about economics and have that application. I mean, the theme is obviously doing something for the game, so yeah, it's interesting. And even the newly updated 60th edition looks 60th anniversary edition, which is like crazy in and of itself to say that. Yeah, it looks interesting.
All right, that's it for me for this week. What you got for us here, Braden?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking a little bit, of course, in the main course about, anticipation, leading up to that first play. And I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe a negative experience that you had with the first play of a game. And I'll give you guys some time to think about it while I'll tell you about mine first. So one of the games that I had done a lot of research into, I loved the theme a lot. And we played this once together. This was probably, oh my gosh, I don't know, 4 years ago now, around Halloween, set up the lights and everything like that. And it was Nemesis for me. And what really was unfortunate was, one, how we lost the game to fire, which, we'd heard can kind of happen for new players as well, not really taking into account how deadly fire can be. But it just felt like, I'd spent all this time doing all this research, putting effort into the game, learning the game, teaching the game, and then it kind of ends very prematurely. Nothing. It feels like I don't even remember what even happened, if anything. Like, did the Queen come out maybe once or something? But like, it was just like fire, and then we were dead, kind of thing. And I know that that's probably just part of the game. It's something that you have to identify with. And, I definitely want to give it another chance. But I was very disappointed where I had this kind of emergent narrative gameplay in my head. And, this person backstabs and then they just get out. And, I was disappointed.
And here's the thing with that one specifically. I feel like games that are really hard, or like not even really hard, are just hard and are meant to be like you play that same game and it's not a campaign game and you're playing it multiple times, and like winning is a big deal, and you're going to have like unique emergent things that come up each time you play and different experiences. It's almost like not a type of game that's good to play with a group, with any people that you're only going to play once with, or like you might not play it right away again with, because it's great that game can give you an experience where like, oh, we just got destroyed in this and we want to come back. It reminds me a little bit of Ghost Stories, where like you play Ghost Stories and you're like, oh my God, this is so punishing. But say you're going to play with a friend who you only play board games with like twice a year, and you play Nemesis and they might never play it again. If that is how the game ends, in one of these like really sort of like either anticlimactic or just really punishing ways, they could leave it being like, wow, I don't like that board game, not realizing the other side of the flip side of that coin, where you can have this amazing experience because you just didn't get it that time, right? So it's almost like it struck me as a game that you almost do have to commit and be like, I'm going to play this, if not once a month, once every couple of months, and we're not going to have to teach the rules anymore, and it's going to be most of the same people, and like how often as like grown adults, especially with children and stuff in the mix and work and schedules, like how easy is that to do? Like, especially with us who have like so many board games we want to play. It's not like we just each have like 5 to 10 board games that we're going between. Yeah. So yeah, it's almost like it's just like one of the downsides to that type of game that Nemesis is.
Yeah, and I think I'd hyped myself up on it a little bit too, and we'd heard good things about it from certain people in our Discord and stuff, and like I'm sure like there's I think an awesome game there. A lot of people I think online would agree with that. It just that first play was a little bit disappointing. How about you guys? Did you guys ever have a disappointing first play?
Mine would probably be, and I'm wondering if Dylan's going to have the same one actually, because I had to think about this, and the only one that really comes to mind is Res Arcana. And this is in terms of, I'm trying to think of a game that I was actually excited about going in, because I don't want to just say like I didn't like a game, but I wasn't super interested in it in the first place kind of thing. But because of the pedigree of Tom Lehman with with Race for the Galaxy having been one of my favorite games of all time, going into this and just seeing the art and knowing the kind of like type of game it was, and there was some good buzz coming out, I was really excited for it. I remember going over to Dylan's place. He was pretty excited to try it too, and it's because it's like a dueling sort of 2-player card game, and it fell pretty flat for us. And it's a game that we sort of came around to later and ended up growing on us, and I've since kind of cooled on it again a little bit. But I think the reason why that first play fell so flat was Res Arcana is like it's kind of a race game, right? It's an engine builder, and the better you get, the quicker the game is, like the fewer turns it takes to win. And we realized, like, I think we read online after we had been playing for a while that, like, on average, the best players will usually win the game in round 4, and some will even win the game in round 3. And, like, it's pretty rare that even if we were to play today, like, we still would probably win usually in, like, round 5 or something like that. With this first game of ours, I'm guessing probably ended in round, like, 8 or 9. Like, we were so bad at the game first playing it that the game took quite a while for our engines to even get going. And also it's a game where the turns just feel boring because all you do is like use a card ability that's usually like gain a resource, or use this card to like, unexhaust this other card so you can use it again, which might just like convert a resource into a different resource. So it just kind of felt like we were plodding along for a long time being like, when is the game going to get exciting? But the better we got, the better the game got,
Yeah, and that's an interesting one too, because like you said, like it started off that way, but then like it grew so much for me to the point where it was, I think I had it like at 11 or something at one point in the top 50. So it's like, it's also a great example of going to show that like you can't always go off of first play or, first 5 plays even. Yeah, like I know there's other ones, and I'm struggling to think about the ones that are sort of like on the tip of my tongue, but the two that came to mind for different reasons. So one, Cascadero I'll mention, which I'm not saying I'm very disappointed with, where I didn't like it, but the only reason I included here is that I think when you have a designer with the pedigree of Knizia and how many Knizia games we play, if you almost now just go in with such a high bar expecting to feel a certain way after playing a Knizia game, and if it doesn't hit that bar, it inevitably just feels like some level of disappointment. And it's not even fair, I don't think, to necessarily call it that, because Cascadero is probably like still a good game. It's just when you have like 20 other great Knizia games ahead of it, it's like, why would I go back to Cascadero? And I feel like now it's like I play a new Knizia game and I almost need it to be a top 10 Knizia game. Otherwise, I know there's a very like Cosmo Lancer. I'm not using this as an example for disappointment, but like I really liked Cosmo Lancer, and yet I'm like, when am I going to suggest that over like 10 other Knizia games that I don't play enough that I love, right? It's gotten to that point. So that's one that comes to mind. Then the other one, which I wasn't super disappointed. I think I was just there was so much hype for it, or at least that I had heard at the time, that I expected to leave that first session feeling like I was really compelled to go back to it. And that was Dwellings of Eldervale. That was one where it's just like, again, that it's more so that's me buying into the hype a little bit, and not saying it's not warranted for some people, but it didn't happen to land for me in the same way it seems to have landed for other people. And so I was almost more disappointed that I didn't like it, because there's so much about the presentation and so much about it that I thought was cool. It's just like the idea of setting that all up and getting that to the table. Again, I can name at least 10 other games that are of that weight, that complexity, or whatever, that I'd rather like set up and finally play with you guys than doing another session of Dwellings necessarily. So those two came to mind. I'm sure there's others, but I'll leave it at those.
I thought you were going to say Revive. Because I remember the first time
I forgot about Revive. Yeah, and now I love it.
My place, like the game ended, and Braden and I were like both like, that was pretty cool, and you were like, you know what? I don't think I really liked that.
Yeah.
And now you like it more than either of us.
I really like Revive. Yeah, it's grown on me a ton, and I've learned. Yeah, now this is going to turn into a Revive appetizer, but yeah, Revive's great.
We got to turn this appetizer, I think, maybe into a full blown episode, like going past the first play.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, all right. Okay, just looking behind me here, it looks like the main course is just about to come out of the oven. But before we get to that, let's hear a word from our sponsor.
All You Can Board is proudly sponsored by Victory Pints, our local game store of choice here in Winnipeg, Canada. We strongly believe that Victory Pints is the gold standard of board game stores, not just here in Winnipeg. Their main priority is having a wide selection of games, many of which you won't find elsewhere. They ship Canada-wide, $15 flat rate, or free shipping for orders over $200, and even take requests to try and order in specific games. They also have a used game section where you can trade in games for store credit, and maybe even find some hidden gems that others have traded in. Note that the used game section is only available for in-person purchases and trades. Again, located in Winnipeg at the corner of Henderson and Hespeler, check them out at victorypints.ca. A massive thank you to Victory Pints for all their support over the years.
Okay, and fresh out of the oven here, we've got Board Game Foreplay. Now, just watch out, it is a little bit hot. Just be careful here for the plate here in front of you. And I want to talk just a little bit about where the term Board Game Foreplay came from, first of all. It did come from my partner, Sarah, but we were talking about Fate of the Fellowship, and I was looking at stock sites because, it's out of stock, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to keep track of, like, where it's going and, like, where I can get it, and she's like, just pre-order it from somewhere, and then that way you can, instead of, like, spending your time tracking where it is, you can use that to engage in Board Game Foreplay, and I just looked at her and I was like, well, what did you say? What do you mean? She's like, yeah, like Board Game Foreplay. Like you can like look at a video of like people playing it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a genius way to describe that. So we're going to be talking about what Board Game Foreplay looks like to us. So my first question for you guys is, of course, before you are interested or before you acquire a game, if you're really interested in a game, do you look at some of the materials that the game has? And if so, what are those things that you look at? And we'll start with you first, Carlo.
Mostly I will sometimes glance over a rule book in advance, but not always. I would say less than half the time before buying a game, I've actually like read through the rules, maybe 20-30% of the time. I would say mostly it comes down to reviews, like whether it's video reviews on YouTube, stuff that I hear on podcasts, or even if that's just like session reports playing it once or twice. And then I also use just like looking at ratings on BGG, but I'm not looking just at like the number or like scrolling to see, how many 10s there are or anything like that. It's specifically the write-ups. And I'm just looking for what type of things people are highlighting as, pros and cons, seeing if the same things are coming up over and over across multiple comments, or just seeing the kind of things that people are saying. So I will rarely go buy something just based off of like one person saying like this is a great game kind of thing. It's usually just an amalgamation of the kind of things I'm reading and hearing in advance.
What about you, Dylan?
Yeah, I definitely don't very often read rule books in advance, and this is something I actually like actively want to try and almost like force myself to change, because I'm going to use Fea's Swamp as an example here. Like I admittedly, like I thought Fea's Swamp was kind of a different game. And I'm not saying it's bad. Like I really liked my first play, but like I thought it was going to be a different game than what it was, because all I really knew about it going in, I heard the designers of Terra Mystica system, and I was like, yeah, that's enough. I'm interested. And so I heard about it on podcasts, but whenever I find that when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm often like I'm on the bus or I'm doing other things at the same time. And when they're talking about rules, a lot of it goes over my head. I digest parts of it, but I really don't remember what what they're talking about. And so I probably heard some of this. And I think I even remember hearing Pick Up and Deliver, but I just assumed it was an additional mechanic they had added into like the Terra Mystica system. And so I got it and I'm setting it up and learning the rules for these people coming over. And I'm like, wow, this is not at all what I expected. Which is, again, it wasn't a bad thing, but I'm realizing that with so many games in my collection, like it would be beneficial for me to like have a better idea of whether I actually do want to buy a game or just like play it another time. So like I don't read rule books very often. Reviews, I will if it's a game that has been out for a longer time. Like if it's not a brand new game, if it's a game that came out in 2017, and all of a sudden Carla puts it on my radar and I go look, like then I will sometimes read reviews on Board Game Geek or other places, or even search them up on YouTube to just get an idea of like, now that this game's been out for that long, what are people saying about it? Whereas if it's a game that's like brand new, I just find that too often the reviews and things I read all have the rose-colored glasses on, and which I understand, like I've been there before too. And so I just find that I'm not quite ready to trust the reviews at that point, because I don't know where people are going to land ultimately on the game over time. And then, yeah, I kind of went over podcasts or playthroughs. I rarely use, but I will if I really am not getting a sense of how a game plays. I will usually not watch the entire playthrough, but I'll put it on and kind of like skip through it to try to like be like, okay, I understand. But I think all this just is like, I usually avoid stuff because I like to like crack a game open, read the rule book, and like feel like I'm like, there's like, it's like Christmas morning, I'm like discovering it all there for the first time, rather than like I open the box and I already know how to play and I'm just really like unpacking stuff for whenever that first play is.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question too, is like keeping yourself almost isolated from different either opinions or things, like, because I know I like to do that with movies, and I think you do too, Dylan, where it's like, ideally, I want to know nothing about a movie when I'm going in. I don't want you to tell me that it's good or the best movie that you've ever seen, because now that's setting an expectation for me. I want to go in, you tell me, hey, this is a good movie. I'm like, okay, great. That's all I need to know. I'm going to go watch this movie. You tell me it's a good board game. I'm going to go and play that board game and then make judgments for myself on like where it's really succeeding or maybe kind of falling behind if there is, right? Like, so I can keep that, so I don't have these preconceived notions kind of seeping into my judgment while I'm playing the game. And it just kind of, if someone says like, oh, there's a twist in this movie, but I'm not going to tell you when, or like when, I'm going to be sitting there thinking about, okay, when's the twist going to happen, right? Like, I don't want to know those things necessarily. And I get a little bit of that with board games too.
You're both better at with this movies, especially, and maybe shows, whatever, than I am. I've gotten better, but for a while, like if I'm excited about a movie, like especially like back in the day with Marvel movies or Avengers and stuff, a new trailer comes out, and I'd be like watching it like minutes after it drops on YouTube, and I'd be like watching it multiple times, dissect it, be like, oh my god, what does this mean? What does this mean? And I found that it didn't bother me as much to go into superhero movies with a bit of that context, because a lot of it's pulled from comic books or stories that have existed for a while. But I have been burned enough times in the last like 10 years from watching a trailer and then realize when you're watching the movie, like, oh my god, they put scenes in the trailer from like the last 10 minutes of the movie that I just like have started trying to like avoid. Unless I really, really am excited, I'll sometimes watch the teaser or different things like that. But you guys are definitely better than I am at that.
I think one game that I tried to isolate myself from is Vantage. Was one that I really tried to actively avoid things, and I'm really glad that I did, because I played through it now 7, 8, maybe coming up on 9 times. I can't really remember, somewhere around there, and just I'm not gonna go into it, because other people who are listening to this might be like, hey, whoa, I don't want to know things either. Okay, I'll just say that it's a good discovery to kind of uncover things in Vantage on your own, and I'm going to leave it there to keep it just kind of brief, to kind of follow my own rule too. For me, when it comes to games and like getting excited for games, I say that I will keep myself isolated, but that's honestly, I think, actually a pretty rare case now I'm thinking about it. If I'm excited for a game and it's been out for a while, like Fate of the Fellowship, like Nemesis was also one of these other ones too, is I will watch playthroughs. I will watch multiple playthroughs just to get an idea of how it flows. I get a way better sense of the rules and how it plays rather than I'm trying to think if I've ever read a rule book before even having the game in front of me and been like, okay, yeah, you know what? I think I have such a more difficult time understanding what is fun necessarily about the game, just reading the rules rather than seeing it being played. Or even just being taught with the game in front of them so that they're showing how it kind of works. So I watch a lot of videos. Maybe that's just because, I teach video and I do video and I love video. But, mostly I get it from like watching playthroughs. Blood in the Clock Tower being another one too. I watched so many games before I even played the dang thing, So, and yeah, that includes reviews. Do a lot of podcasts as well, and I agree with you, Dylan. Like getting into rules a little bit right over my head, but if they're giving me their impressions on the game, okay, cool. Maybe I want to try that now for myself. And just seeing kind of like what's on BGG as well. How about you, Carlo? Do you do any like insulating from like games? You're like, I don't want to know nothing about this. Like, how does that work for you?
For sure. But let's say like if I'm like listening to an episode of a podcast and they're just talking about games they played recently and they're going to talk about this as one of them, I'm not going to like skip that part or anything. But once I would say like once I know enough about a game to know that I want to buy it or seek it out to play it, that's usually where I'll stop looking for more information about it. Like once I'm already sold on a game, I'm not going to keep reading reviews or looking for other stuff because that's where I start feeling like, yeah, I don't want too much to color my perspective. I wonder if we would do this less if we weren't, like if we didn't have a YouTube channel and a podcast, like if we weren't, covering games and reviewing games and stuff. Like if I was just in the hobby as just a gamer, I might research things even more thoroughly. Not even might, I'd say I for sure would. Like when I think about my approach to buying games before we started our YouTube channel, that's kind of how I was. I didn't buy many games. I researched a lot and made sure I was really, really going to like something. I never bought a game thinking, yeah, there's a good chance I'll sell this in a few years, but I'll play it 5 or 10 times and then who cares if I lose $20 on it or whatever. Like now I have a completely different mindset to that. So yeah, I would say now as soon as I know enough about a game, I don't want to see too much about how it plays out. And that's part of, we'll come back to this later, but that's why I avoid playthroughs for the most part. I so rarely watch playthroughs because they often capture like the magic of like clever moves that can be made in the game or, things that like seeing something for the first time that might make you go like, whoa, I didn't think that was possible. I would rather experience that around the table with people than experience that kind of sitting on my couch and then like hope to replicate that at the table when I eventually play it.
Yeah, and I think different games are going to lend themselves more to watching playthroughs, at least for me, rather than other games. Like, I don't know if I would watch a playthrough for like a Kinesia design, right? Like you said, Carlo, I think the magic is kind of just discovering it at the table. But for things that are a little bit more narrative-driven or player-based driven, Blood in the Clock Tower, as well as the other game that I mentioned, Nemesis, those two, you're not necessarily going to have the same game from game to game or the same strategy or the same things that are happening. And there's a little bit more player dependency in what's happening there too. So knowing how that kind of plays out, if I want to get a sense of how the rules are for a certain game, yeah, sure. I'd love to see it kind of being interacted with, but yeah, it's interesting how I'm even just now discovering that I think it's a particular like grouping of games I'd be more likely to watch a playthrough rather than a different type of game too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's interesting because and maybe this is where you're going to go next, Braden, so maybe I'm jumping the gun, but because I feel like in advance I consume less board game content, I actually feel like and this is specific to us having a YouTube channel too, like I feel like if I didn't, this wouldn't be the case, but I actually feel like I buy more games because I buy more without, I don't know what exactly I'm getting into. And there's been numerous games that I've purchased and I was either excited for, or thought I was interested in, and then all it takes is me to play it once, even if I didn't like dislike it, to go, you know what, I can already tell this is going to leave my collection, or I can already tell that in hindsight, if I knew that this is how it was going to land, maybe I would have waited to like see if a friend bought it first, or if I could play it at a game cafe or something. But that is very much coming from the position of privilege of having a YouTube channel and just playing so many games, having games sent from publishers and stuff like that. If that wasn't the case, I'd probably be flipping this 180 and saying I'd be buying less. But I just feel like I just take more chances. I just say, like again, using the most recent example I have of Fea's Swamp, it's just like, oh, Terra Mystica designers, Terra Mystica system, yep, put it in the cart. Like I don't even have to, like I don't have to really think twice about it.
Yeah, before we go any further, I just have to jump in here. I don't know who in it or where you heard Terra Mystica system, because it is the same designers, but it's actually like Fea's Swamp is like a re-implementation of a game called Kaivai that came out in 2005, which was like I think like 7 years before Terra Mystica. So I think I've heard people kind of associating it, like it gets weirdly associated with Terra Mystica more than Kaivai because it's the more recognized game by the designers. But yeah, it's actually re-implementation of a completely different game.
Like, I don't know if this is something that came out of content creators and podcasters and stuff misrepresenting it, but like specifically, I've heard multiple times them say this is the Terra Mystica system or something like that, or if not system, like another synonym for it or whatever. So I don't know if that's just like, again, misrepresenting it or whatever, but that's constantly what I heard with this one. And like after I have to be honest, first I saw Fea's Swamp and I just heard it talked about. I didn't really look into it. Once I did, that's the recurring thing they have coming up. And yeah, like now having played it, I would say it's very much, someone else I listened to said it's kind of like a sister game to a Terra Mystica or something. And that fits it much better to me than saying it's the Terra Mystica system. It's the hex grid is the thing that's most like Terra Mystica. So yeah, that's a good call out.
Terra Mystica? Okay.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like I'm not calling you out here. It's like you said, everyone who's talking about Fea's Swamp, the comparisons to Terra Mystica always come up, and it's just odd to hear Terra Mystica mentioned more than Kaivai when that's not like where the roots of the game are associated from. But anyway,
I think it's interesting that, you know, putting out designer names and that just being kind of like a yes, I definitely want to try, would not be something that I would have considered if we go back a few episodes to the board game journey, right at the very beginning, right? But now, like where you have an idea of where your tastes land, like you see a name and that helps guide you in like kind of where, yeah, I would absolutely try something like that. One of the things that I just thought of now too is, you know, all these different playthroughs, rules are kind of like first impressions. Have you guys ever looked at like a box, just a box itself? Like how much does the box influence you, or have you already kind of made up your mind on certain games before even seeing like a specific box? And maybe that, again, more applies to early on when you're first getting into board games.
I'm someone notorious, like the quote unquote, like judging a book by its cover. Like with books, the amount of books that I've bought, like not anytime recently, but in the past, just from like being at the bookstore and being like, oh, like, yeah, this cover art looks great. I'll probably like the book. And I've been right. I've been wrong way more than I've been right. But like, yeah, board game is the same thing. Although I will say that it's not just the front cover. Like the front cover might make me go, oh, I think I want this game, but I'll always flip it around and at least look if that artwork is still reflected on like the components and the board itself. If it is, often like yes, I might look into it on Board Game Geek and everything, but unless my findings are that it has like a 2.0 and everyone's saying this is trash, I probably still will get it, just because sometimes there's something magical about and nice about a game that you're not going to keep in your collection for a long time, but even just setting it up on the table once kind of feels like the experience is worth it because it's beautiful enough, or it's unique enough, or it like impresses your friends enough, or whatever, like, or impresses everyone at the table enough. So yeah, I definitely do this, and having spent a lot of time around Victory Pints, our local game store here, like the amount of times I've just pulled a game off the shelf and been like, I think I want this game, just based on the way the presentation is probably like more than I should.
Yeah, and for me, I would say it's not as often the art itself as much as things that I'm looking to recognize that are on the box. So not just saying like specifically the designer's name and stuff, but like, you know, those recognizable, like the 2-player Cosmos or 2-player like Lookout games, like those like square boxes that like, you know, Patchwork and Great Plains and stuff come in. Or if I see the kind of like Lookout games, like there's a certain art styles or whatever, just immediately, like the way I think of it is if I'm on like the BGG main page and I'm scrolling through the hotness where it just has the 50 games there, you know, I'll probably check that main page, you know, on average once a day, a couple times a day, whatever, or every other day. And that's often what's going to make me stop and click on a game, is scrolling by and seeing something that I recognize or that catches my eye right away. But it's not always specifically just like the art itself.
Carlos sees Clemens Franz art and he starts foaming at the mouth with anticipation.
Why wouldn't everyone?
Yes, of
Clemens
course.
Franz is amazing.
Why wouldn't everyone? For me, I actually am thinking about the games that I have bought, and I don't know if there is a single. Well, okay, maybe there is at least one game, but very rarely would I say that there is a game that I did not take some time to look into and research a little bit before buying, or I had heard about it and had an impression about it before buying. I think one of the only games maybe I hadn't gone in and researched on was Contrabanter, which I haven't played yet, which is more of a party game where you're trying to get into these different phrases by just like these keywords into these sentences and get them by your opponents, kind of thing. But like, I'm like, okay, that kind of sounds like up my alley. And I think that, you know, worrying about that first impression, how maybe you have a little bit, maybe it's too much foreplay where you're looking too much into things where, you know, if I looked at Gang of Dice, for example, right? Maybe I had looked into that before getting a copy or playing it or something like that. And I see, it's a 6.3. I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's, you know, meh. But playing it was completely different, right? Oh my God, I love Gang of Dice. It's phenomenal. Having maybe too much research can kind of ruin, or maybe you almost gatekeep yourself from not getting into different games and stuff too. So is there a point where do you think too much research starts to kill that excitement? Like, I don't think I've done that necessarily for myself. Well, maybe in certain games, but like, what's the fine line is basically what I'm trying to get at here. Like, you know, is there a line?
I think that for me, it's not so much that it's going to kill the excitement. It's that I find that if I start researching too much and looking into a game too much, I get into this loop and to this point where I can find things about almost any game I haven't played as I read rules or as I watch playthroughs, whatever, that I might say, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like that, or oh, I think I'm going to like that. And if I start to have too many of those things, then I'm starting to really overthink it too much. Where when I think about, like, even when we talked about Resurrecana earlier or Revive, like, these are games that if I had researched those games beforehand, would I have like felt how I did after the first play, and then it would have prevented me from playing them? Maybe, but I just find that with board games specifically, I more than any other medium, I need to play it myself. And like to Carlos' point, like, I can watch a playthrough and I can see other people having fun, but as we all know, it's like board games almost, again, more than any other medium, I find that there's such a discrepancy and a disparity between, like, Carlo can love a game Braden can think it's okay and I can hate it. And that yes, that happens with any media, movies, books, TV shows. But for me personally, games is where there's the biggest discrepancy, and I find it the most interesting too. And so I feel like you need that personalized play to really know. And if I just research too much, I end up getting into a point where I'm sort of psyching myself out of it, and I maybe miss the opportunity of playing it and then be pleasantly surprised by, oh, I thought I wasn't going to like this, but now I did. And really, I just need to like put it in the cart, purchase it, try it, and find out for myself.
This foreplay metaphor is just working so well.
Well, that actually, okay. I was going to ask the question earlier, but this seems like the right time to ask it. So on that topic, Braden.
Yeah.
Does this not imply that, how do I say this? That you're going to, once you start engaging in this board game foreplay, that you're not just going to suddenly like take a break and then like forget about the game for months before eventually coming back to it, right? Like there should be some, I don't want to say continuity. Well, I was going to use the word continuity, some, not as necessarily like a large gap, I would say.
Right. There should, I mean, it depends, right? Like, I think I've gotten my fill on Fate of the Fellowship right now. Like, I understand kind of how, like a few turns play. I haven't watched like a full playthrough, but I'm like, okay, cool. Like, this seems very interesting, and I would like to kind of try that out. So I don't want to spoil the experience necessarily fully of going to play the game and discovering things and how things kind of change by necessarily watching that. Like, and again, I know that there are different scenarios and like the way the game changes and obviously how the cards come out, but I don't think that there's necessarily needs to be some sort of like, okay, I'm going to do some research here, and then like in like a week or 2 weeks, then we'll actually have the payoff of playing the game and have this kind of event thing here too. So it doesn't necessarily, I think, like that time can be still pretty wide because I still have an idea of what to anticipate, let's say.
I was just going to ask if it can be, in some cases, either like detrimental or it can basically like backfire to have, I don't want to say whether it's too much of this board game foreplay or to have it too far in advance due to either like delays or unmet expectations. And like, I guess a more concrete example that I can give here is specifically for like crowdfunding games. And this happens to people like without them what you know what I mean? Like you're all in on this campaign for 30 days or whatever it is. You're like in the comments, you're reading the updates, you're, getting the updates about like the game is being manufactured, whatever. And then like, and you start reading, watching videos, all this kind of stuff. And then maybe every few months you get an update about, oh, the game is finally going to the factory. Oh, it's finally, going to be shipping. By the time the game arrives to you, it could be a year, sometimes multiple years from when you were actually excited about it. At that point, getting excited, doing all that research, reading the rules, and then losing your excitement and forgetting how the game plays and having to feel like you start over. At that point, do you or would other people, I know we don't back a lot of games on crowdfunding between the three of us, but like, do you think there's something to that about where people might look back and regret having gone too far down the kind of foreplay rabbit hole before the game even came out?
Just that sentence is so good to me. I think
you chose the topic, man. Not me.
I know, and I'm loving every minute of it, Jerry. I think that for sure. I think there's a point where, if we're talking about years going by, right? Again, especially in Kickstarter, maybe a good example, not necessarily a good example of this because it hasn't been years, but the recent campaign launch by Bitewing. I looked a little bit into Rolling Deep. I watched Nick's playthrough, just a little bit of it, just to get an idea. And Dylan and I had talked about it, and Dylan's like, I don't want to know anything about it. I think I'm going to play this game. That's all I need to know. I'm like, you know what? Fair enough. And that's kind of why this kind of topic also resonated with me as well. And for me, now that I've watched a little bit of it, I'm like, okay, I'm also good now too. Like I want to try it. That's where it's going to end for me. Whenever it comes out, that's fine. If people are going back to a game, getting those drip feed of the updates and stuff, like they're getting strung along, game update number 50, guys, here's some more artwork that we're just finalized. We're going to be going to the printers in 2 weeks, I think that can be for some people. I think that, that they want to be teased along all the way until the very end, if we right, like, and that works for them. I think for me personally, when it comes to doing this kind of research, I want to get an impression of it, and then when I have the ability, try it out for myself, whether that is down the line. If I'm more excited about a game and I'm watching more content, I'm probably more likely that I'm going to want to push to play it a lot sooner too. So I think that's also a part of it as well. So I think it's a good question. Like, does that time factor matter a lot? And I think, obviously, like any other answer here, it depends on the person. And
I'm glad you brought up crowdfunding, because that's what I was going to mention, is that this is one of the reasons I think I don't, one of the reasons, not the only reason that I don't back games as much anymore, or don't really enjoy the process of it, is one, like, I just find that if like a game, and it's very common for a game to, you back the game and you don't get it for like 2 or 3 years, like that's not an unheard of thing. It's just actually like probably a common thing. And what if I find out by the time those 3 years show up that like, oh, I don't even really like that genre of game as much as I did. I've cooled on it a whole bunch, and then my excitement is sort of killed for a game that maybe if it had landed 3 years earlier, it would have been the exact right time when I was ready for that type of game. And I think what it is like, to use this metaphor and keep it going, is that like I don't want unexpected, like we're talking the foreplay is the what you look into and what you sort of get excited about in advance. I don't want an unexpected climax. I want the climax of playing the game to be when I want it to be, and I don't want to all of a sudden be like, oh, 5 years later it's like, oh yeah, here it comes, I'm supposed to be excited about this now. Like, I want, if I'm going to look into a game and I'm going to sort of like do some research in advance, when I'm ready to pull the trigger, I want to be able to then go and say, I'm putting this game in my cart and I'm buying the game. I don't want to have to say, oh yeah, like Rolling Deep right now, I could go and I could consume a whole bunch of stuff and get really excited about it, and then the end result of that is I back it, and then I say, well, one day it's going to show up my doorstep, and that's going to be the surprise climax of the choice I've made. And that's not how I really like it. It's another, like, even just to compared to video games, it's the reason I don't really get excited about very many video games. There are some I still do, and I'll watch all the trailers and everything, but I used to love, when I was a kid, like the anticipation of like, oh, the new Kingdom Hearts game is coming out next March and it's November, and like every single trailer that comes out, every single article the IGN writes, I'm gonna read and stuff. Whereas now, the thing I like more than anything is opening up one of my game consoles and finding out this game is out now, and I'm like, yep, I'm just gonna buy it. This is what I'm doing tonight, or this is what I'm doing this weekend. Like, that's what I prefer, so I can choose. So all that being said, unless it's the Queen's Dilemma. Yeah, and to be fair, the Queen's Dilemma is one that like it showed up and it was exactly what I wanted. I was still ready for that type of experience, and it's living up to every single metric for me. I'm loving it. But there are other games that we are still waiting for that, like, it's not that I'm not excited for them, but like I think Robomon is one that, like, when Carlo first put it on my radar and suggested we back it, I was really excited about it. Like, I grew up playing Pokemon games, and I was like, there's a lot to love here. And now it's at the point where every so often I get an update and I'm like, oh yeah, right, Robomon. And it's not that I'm not excited, but it definitely has waned just by the fact that, like, I don't, like, one day it's going to show up a win. You know what I mean? So that part of backing games and crowdfunding is just not really for me anymore. If I want to be able to just, even if I'd rather a game be sold out and I'm waiting for a shipment to show up than back something, even though it's guaranteed, but not know when it's going to, that guarantee is going to actually fulfill. Yeah, I think the whole crowdfunding thing is interesting. Obviously crowdfunding has made some games like be possible to come to life, right? And it's that fine line of like when you are getting it, and obviously going into it knowing that you're not going to get it for a few
potentially a few years, could be months. It depends on who is doing the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding, right? Like it all really depends. And I think, again, how much hype you are building around it for yourself, the further that you get into potentially this hobby, hopefully, so the more that you realize and kind of look at that for yourself. And absolutely, if you want to get taken away and whisked away by a game, by all means, man, absolutely, 100%. I did that with Blood on the Clock Tower, and look at where I am now.
Blood on the Clock Tower wined and dined you.
It did, and oh my gosh, did it take me over. Yeah, I think, just having an idea of like intentionally consuming things, and again, being open to new experiences as well. It's really interesting, this, talking about the push and pull of like how much research is going to be too much for yourself, as well.
Does Sarah know how many hours you've invested in watching Blood on the Clock Tower footage, Braden?
Well, you know what's really funny, actually, is she listened to the first episode that I was on, and she turned to me and goes, "Huh, you really have a lot to say about board games, hey?" And I was like, you know what? I never thought of it that way, I guess. I guess so, yeah. You know what? You're not wrong about that. And I've never said anything to her since then. No, of course not. No, she was right, though. Thinking about how much... Actually, I have a very funny story that I want to share, too, is that... my daughter was playing with some of the games on my shelf or whatever, and she picked up a Anomia and started playing with it. And I was like, "Oh, did you know that they changed the Anomia box art on the?" And I just stopped myself right there because I was like, "Why do you need to know this whatsoever?" And she looked at me and she's like, "I was like, no, I stopped myself. No, it's not." She's like, "You have a lot to talk about," and I was like, "You're right. And sometimes people's enjoyments are going to be specific to, how much they want to consume when it comes to that stuff as well. Yes. And, I kind of want to tie a little bit of Kickstarters into my next question about regretting purchases. And for me, there's definitely been, again, especially early on when backing Kickstarters, I was one of the 200,000+ people who backed Exploding Kittens, and why I played it once, maybe, I don't know. It's not my favorite game, but hey, they're doing something right over there. So have you guys ever regretted a purchase because you've got hyped on something and played it, or you watched a review and they're like, "Oh my god, this was awesome," and for them specifically, and maybe you didn't realize that, maybe our tastes don't quite align? Or has there ever been a moment like that for you guys?
I wouldn't say it's a specific reviewer or one specific video or anything like that, but when I looked at my previously owned games listed on my BGG collection, the only one I had rated lower than a 5, which I actually have rated as a 3 out of 10, is Kingdom Rush Rift in Time. And that's one that I didn't back it on Kickstarter. So I managed to avoid the sort of hype around then, and thought, you know what, I'm going to monitor this. I know this will be available in retail. Enough places will have this. And this is sort of, for those who don't know, Kingdom Rush was initially like a mobile app game. I never actually played it, and then they made this board game version, which you can play solo or up to 4 players, and it's kind of like a puzzle scenario-based polyomino game where you're laying tiles down to kind of defeat these enemies and whatnot. And so I went into it with high expectations, just based on, it was getting a lot of positive buzz, really nice artwork, the fact that it was this kind of like scenario-based puzzle, kind of very tactical. I don't know, it seemed like I like those kind of puzzly games, and I was looking for something to have to try solo. I think this was around when I was starting to get into solo games, and I've spoke about it in my Curating My Collection video, where I talked about why I was getting rid of it, so I won't get into details here, but the game just totally fell flat for me, and that was that was probably my biggest regret in terms of falling prey to the hype.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot about Kingdom Rush, but I do remember, I think I liked it more than you, but I was also underwhelmed by it. And I think that it's just also like, I don't know that I would use the word regret, because there's not many, I'm sure there's ones I'm forgetting about, but there's not many I regret to the point where I would say like, I wish I never bought that. But the closest I came, and it's still not, I wouldn't say it's a regret, is Tainted Grail. And that's one where it's just Tainted Grail, the disappointment is just because when you're getting into a game like that, you're expecting to be like, okay, well, I'm getting into this for like 15 sessions, like a year of casual play whenever people can get together. And it was like we did 2 sessions and I'm the one leading those sessions, and I'm no longer compelled to gather people for it because I'm realizing I'm not having a good time. And then like I'm almost relieved to hear that other people are underwhelmed too, so that I don't have to feel bad about not wanting to continue with this campaign. But I also don't regret that, because also like that was, I did a how to play for the channel. It led to them sending us the follow-up to Tainted Grail, and me being able to sort of come at it from the approach of, I didn't like the first one, like legitimately, what have they improved? What do I like or dislike still about the follow-up? So I don't regret it, but I feel like there's many instances of me coming close to backing different campaigns that I then realized after seeing like the issues with fulfillment, or like what the game was like when it showed up, or whatever, that I'm like, this would have been one that I regretted had I backed it. I just feel like Tainted Grail in many ways like taught me that lesson early enough in my board game journey that it kind of colored how I approach Kickstarters and campaigns going forward, crowdfunding campaigns, to sort of protect me from making that same mistake too many times further.
Yeah, I think the same with me too, especially with crowdfunding campaigns are very liable to kind of burn you sometimes like this. And obviously not always, but happens with me a few times where I backed a game and I've got the game now, and you know, you played it and just like, oh, this was not what I had expected, even though maybe I've watched something, or I was like, I don't need to watch something. I think it's going to be great on its own. And just, you know, kind of just fell flat for me too. But yeah, it's never a regret though. Like those things are things that you, at least that I have internalized as things that you learn from, right? Those mistakes are like, okay, this is not what I'm going to do going forward, right? This was my one time. And then you back another game and you go, okay, that was my second time. So now I need to really evaluate what's going on here with me. Do I have a problem? Yes or no? And the answer is yes. Yes, I have a problem. But then you learn, and then you make changes.
And as an aside too, I just feel like this is reinforcing that we do have to do an episode of our podcast one day, like specifically about crowdfunding and just as a topic, and we can all sort of approach it, because I know we all do, but like just speaking for myself, like I have a lot of thoughts about crowdfunding, especially like I feel like I have more and more as it goes on, just as what that landscape looks like and like what it does for hype and how that hype contributes or takes away from or is a detriment to the hobby and the industry and stuff like that. So I think at some point we should definitely do that as a topic and just like really get into the weeds on board game crowdfunding and what it's like these days.
Yeah,
I agree. Even if we look at the games we've historically backed and look at which ones, like how many do we each still have? Which ones do we like entirely regret, or which ones maybe never even fulfilled, that kind of thing. Like even just looking at the raw numbers, I think would be super interesting, because I've wondered that myself about the, I don't know, I haven't backed that many, but yeah, they haven't all been hits, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, keep an eye out for future podcast topic. So it sounds like, you know, we all like a little bit of foreplay when it comes to our board games, but
a whole lot of climax.
That's right. Thanks, Reiner Knizia. Sorry, Dr. Knizia.
Reiner Knizia has made me climax more than any other designer. I'll have to decide at a later time if I'm going to keep that in the episode.
So can I ask you guys something?
Yeah.
Specifically before game night, because I know we're talking about like before making purchases or before that game arrives or whatever. But what I want to ask you guys about is like when there's a game night coming up, whether you're the one hosting it or you're going to be attending at someone else's place or you're going to a convention or whatever, what type of board game foreplay do you engage in terms of like whether it's rereading rules or reading rules in advance for the first time of a game you might be playing sample turns if you're the one hosting and you have the game set up at home, reading up on strategies if you're going against more experienced players. Like what kind of stuff do you guys think about or actually do before having a game night?
So one of the ones that really stuck out for me was when I hosted Station Fall at my place. That game, I wanted to know kind of inside and out. So I think that was one of the ones where I actually read the rule book and then also followed along when it came to a playthrough and watched, I think, pretty much the entire game play out to understand what are the type of actions that people are taking, what are the contexts that they're doing them in as well. Because Station Fall is just wildly crazy at all times. So that one was one where I consumed a lot. I watched probably at least two different how to plays, and maybe in piecemeal, maybe not all the way through, and then watched an actual playthrough of the game. It was like a 7 or 8 person game or something like that, just to get a sense of what the gameplay loop was like, the different actions. And it really not caramelized, it really, I don't know what the word is, it really made those rules feel concrete to me though by watching them. And I think that's what helps me for playthroughs, is seeing the rules in action and being like, okay, I understand how it all goes forward.
Yeah, and I feel like if I'm going to a game session and I am the only person who hasn't played that game and doesn't know the rules, if I have the time, I will try to prioritize watching a rules video, reading a rule book, whatever, so that even if there's going to be a refresher, it's not necessarily that the teach is only happening because of me. Not that no one we play with is going to be like, I'm upset about that or care, but I'll just do that in case I can like expedite us being able to get into the game. But in general, like I think I almost approach it the same way. Like there's been times where we've been invited over to Carlos and I know what the game is that we're going to play, or he says this is what I'm going to have to set up to start, and I know I don't know the rules to it, and I've had the time, but I know that there's going to be a teach happening whether I watch a rules video or not, or whether I'm going to read a rule book or not. And in that case, I think I'd rather have the rule teach from the human in front of me rather than me come and then feel like during the rules teach that I'm like, not that it matters, but that I'm not like needing to be as present for it. So it kind of depends on the situation, and that'll dictate like how much I'm actually like engaging with anything ahead of time.
I can't tell you how many times I've watched, and this is silly, but the rules video for the trick-taking game Fives. I like, honestly, no joke, probably like close to coming up on like 10 times, because I think there were so many potential times that we were going to play it, and I was like, oh, I need to refresh on like what these are, and like me just reading it, not quite enough. Like seeing it actually, like how it was explained and everything, like that was enough for me to like, and again, it was so quick that I could just turn that, play that, and then understand from there. But like, yeah, there were so many times where I thought, okay, we're probably going to play it, so I should know it, and then just it didn't happen. So there was a lot of like build up when it came to that, and then we played half a game, and then we got to play it again.
Definitely. But yeah, man, the amount of times I've done that too, like read rules for a game or watched videos and thought it's going to get played, and then the game doesn't get played, and then maybe months go by before the next opportunity, and then you're kind of like relearning it again from scratch or whatnot. But yeah, just going back to what you were saying real quick about just a funny story is, so Nathan came over to play games a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, whatever, and he actually, I didn't know he was going to do this, but he watched how to play video for Tigris and Euphrates just in the back of the Uber while he was Ubering over to my place. No headphones on or anything. And he barely needed a refresher. It was his first time playing, and he won. Wow. I was like, wow, as if you learned Tigris and Euphrates off of a video in the back of an Uber and then beat us. Like, yeah.
I wonder if that Uber driver is now like, man, that game sounded pretty good. Like, I should get to this.
Absolutely. But yeah, and Braden, I'm glad like you brought up Station Fall, because that's the type of game, like I remember I had our AYCB copy at my place for a while, and that was the type of thing where I knew like that was the only way I was going to feel comfortable teaching it, is if I would have actually like watched a playthrough. There's maybe only 3 or 4 games I've ever even watched playthroughs for, specifically because they're so complex. But yeah, and I would say for me it's more than it's like preparing for like a specific game at game night. I think for me, I'm more thinking about the game night itself and who's going to be there, what games do they like and not like, what, are the people coming, are they people who like to learn new games, do they prefer playing games we've played before, is someone showing up earlier or later, do we have to account for playing a filler game first, that kind of thing. It can be a lot to consider too, and especially when you're hosting, it can feel like a lot of pressure to make sure no one shows up and is sitting around waiting and that kind of thing, but there's really only so much you can plan for in advance.
All right, and that brings us to our climax here of the end of our podcast. Talking about board game foreplay. If you enjoyed this podcast, hey, guess what? We've got a YouTube channel, we've got a Patreon, we've got a Discord. Come engage with us on those. Let's talk, let's chat more board games, because you know what? Like my wife says, I got a lot to talk about board games. You know what? I need some other people to talk about board games. I love Dylan and Carlo, but hey, the more, the merrier. Also, hey, reviews also help spread the good word of board games around here. And if you leave a review about our podcast, we would thank you so much. So please consider leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice. Otherwise, this has been episode 12 of the All You Can Board podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks for episode number 13.
See ya. I stole your see ya, Carlo. I realized.
I don't always say it. I was about to just...
And goodbye.